So it's been reported that the PlayStation 4 development kits have been handed out to game developers, which is obviously an indication of the hardware that will probably be used in the PlayStation 4, which is really interesting stuff because I'm really looking forward to the PlayStation 4, as opposed to any of the other consoles, pretty much ignoring the Wii U because it doesn't really count. Just a quick note on the gameplay in the background. It's a COD 4 zombie mod. It's a game that I got when I played quite a long time ago. I had it sitting on my hard drive for a while. I played with a bunch of really poor players and got a really good score. Just never found the right time to upload it. So thought I'd use it now. It's a mod that's not really played anymore on PC COD 4, which is a shame because it was really good. But if you're not interested in that, then don't worry about it. But some information is that the processor is going to be based on an AMD A10 APU series, which doesn't actually mean a whole lot to me. I don't know which AMD processor that is, but it's both a CPU and a GPU combined, which is interesting. I think the PlayStation 3 has a graphics card in it. I'm not quite sure on that actually. But anyway, the biggest thing they said was that the ultimate goal was to have 1080p games running at 60 FPS in 3D with no problems, quote unquote. Which sounds awesome, but then again, in the console world, 60 FPS means 60 FPS until you throw a smoke grenade, at which point it'll be 30 FPS. So it's quite a bold statement, really. Just a quick side note on why that's important is pretty much the majority, like 90% of console games are rendered on the Xbox and the PlayStation 3 are rendered at 720p resolution. Yeah, they're upscaled to 1080p, so they advertise as 1080p, but they're actually rendered in a lower resolution than what's actually outputted. It's just upscaled. So I think there's like one or two, maybe a couple of games that are rendered in 1920 by 1080, but it's not very many. And the ones that do definitely don't run at 60 frames per second. So having full HD games at 60 FPS would be, pretty interesting, I think. I'm not quite sure how that's actually going to play out. I've got a feeling it's not going to play out too well, but still, it's a good, sort of benchmark, I think. I'm not quite sure what the processing power is going to be like, but definitely a good benchmark. I'd love to see that. So the dev kits either have 8GB or 16GB of RAM, which is a hell of a lot of RAM. But to be honest, it doesn't really make too much of a difference because RAM is, largely irrelevant in the playing of video games, and 16GB of RAM is relatively standard because it's so cheap these days. So it's not surprising, really. It's not being made in Japan either, which is a bit unusual, as most of these things are made in Japan and Sony's a Japanese company. So that's interesting. We'll have a Blu-ray drive. I think that's quite important. I'm glad it'll have a Blu-ray drive. Blu-rays are still a significant platform of optical media, which obviously everything's moving away from optical media, but I think optical media is still relevant. So that's good. It says 256GB hard drive as standard. That's interesting. Which is obviously great because the newest models of the PlayStation 3s all come with really high capacity hard drives, which is good, the more the better. It didn't say if it was an SSD, a solid state drive, or a mechanical hard drive. Now, if they were to come out with 256GB solid state hard drives on the PlayStation 3 as standard, I think that'd be absolutely fantastic. It'd give them a real edge over the competition, because what a solid state drive does is significantly increase load times and boot times, and that can be an amazing advantage for it. Anyway, yeah, same output as PlayStation 3, HDMI, Ethernet, all that good stuff. They've also revamped the user interface, meaning the PlayStation Store will be available mid-game, which is interesting. It's quite cool. I mean, I got a PlayStation 2 recently myself, and it seems alright. But it means you'll be able to get DLC, even though I'm not a fan of DLC. But you'll be able to buy it without having to go back to the home screen or whatever. Background updates, pretty standard. There wasn't any information about a game controller, which is interesting because the PlayStation, they originally had that boomerang shaped controller. God, it looked horrible. Hopefully they'll come up with something as good as the Xbox controller, because I think that's probably the best controller on the market at the moment. Expected to be announced just before E3 next year. So they'll probably do a press conference just before summer, around summer, just before E3 next year. So I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I'd bet money on 2013, full 2013 release for the PlayStation 3, probably for the new Xbox as well, next Christmas. Not this Christmas, but obviously the Wii U's going to have a head start on all of that on the other consoles, but I'm not sure what to think about the Wii U, to be honest. It's not really relevant at the moment for me, but we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, this is just a bit of information that I found from. They said it was from the development kit, so obviously anything could change. And they're calling it the Orbis and not the PlayStation 4, but I would guess that they end up calling it the PlayStation 4. I think Orbis is just development name like they had with the old consoles before they go into full production. But yeah, it looks good, looks promising. I'm definitely liking 60 FPS on consoles at 1080p in 3D as well. That would be amazing, man. Who knows? Like I said, development kits and consoles are notoriously bad for having a steady frame rate due to underpowered hardware. But I would like to see them putting more money into the processing power rather than other elements of the console. But hopefully they won't have a release as awful as the PS3 was if they manage to not screw it up this time. But we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully there'll be a few games coming out for it. Who knows? Anyway, we'll have to wait and see. So yeah, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and catch you guys later.